Hey guys, coming from you again from my office, away from office, dining room. Anyways, I hope you guys are all doing well. It's still feeling kind of weird to me having to do videos like this, but hey, it's better than nothing, right? Anyways, I've had a lot to think about over the past week or so, and it seems like there's always something weird going on, or somebody else that's having a hard time or what have you. But to me, whenever it comes to times like what we're going through right now, it's a reminder for just how little control you actually have on what's going on, right? To me, times like this, yeah, they're going to irritate you, right? They're interrupting your life, whatever. But to me, the single greatest teaching moment and all that we're going through is a kind of a hard lesson in humility. I mean, whenever you realize just how little you have control of in your life, such as right now, to me, that's a humbling experience, or at least a chance to humble yourself. And what I want to kind of do with that thought is I want to explore a couple parables, all right? In Luke, Luke has this fixation off and on throughout his gospel where he's focused on the fact that Jesus values those that are, socially undesirable, right? The beggars, the lepers, the prostitutes, whatever, what have you. Tax collectors are a recurring theme as we're going to look at today. But what I want you to understand, like if you ever get a chance to study Luke, try to pick up on that that theme coming back every so often. But to me, Jesus is the epitome of a humble servant. He doesn't exalt himself. He doesn't focus on himself. He doesn't tout his divine nature or the fact that he is God, right? That's not what he wants people to take away from who he is. And so if you want to learn what it means to be humble, look at Jesus. Look at what he values in life, what he deems to be the important things, right? Like I said, we're going to look at two different parables. So if you want to check them out while you're watching this video, I'll try to give you a heads up. You can pause it, read it, whatever, and then listen to what I have to think about it. But the first one is in Luke 14. He's at a Pharisee's house, and there's a lot of people watching him. That's kind of beside the point for this video. But where I want to pick up is chapter 14, verse 7. Because these guys, they think a lot of themselves. They think of themselves to be honored, to be revered in society and whatnot. But what Jesus is trying to do is he's trying to take them down a notch, trying to open their eyes to what's actually important in life, right? So in verse 7, he starts in with this parable about a wedding feast, telling them, don't take the seat of honor. Don't sit yourself in a place where you could be taken down a peg. Don't put yourself on a pedestal because chances are you're just going to get kicked out from under you and you're going to be humiliated, right? But then in verse 10, he says, but when you are invited, take the lowest place so that when your host comes, he will say to you, friend, move up to a better place. Then you will be honored in the presence of all your fellow guests, for everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. It's kind of stark words coming from Christ, saying if you're going to sit there and tout yourself, if you're going to focus on yourself and try to elevate yourself above others, then you're going to be knocked down. That's what Jesus is teaching here. But instead, if you humble yourselves, then you will be exalted because that's where you're supposed to be as a Christian, as a follower of Christ. If Jesus didn't exalt himself, then honestly, we don't have any right to either, right? In this parable, just that section, basically, he's saying, don't think more of yourself than you ought to, especially in the presence of others. That to me, that's what we're seeing a lot of right now. If you don't believe me, go to the grocery store. There's a lot of people that are uh, buying in bulk, a lot of people that are stocking up because they got to take care of me. But anytime you do that, you're taking away from somebody else, right? Instead of focusing on your needs, Jesus says, put other people first. Humbling yourself in terms of other people is not thinking less of yourself. It's just thinking of yourself less. Putting others' needs first, putting their problems before your own. Be humble among other people. But Christ doesn't just stop there. He has another parable not too much later in Luke. If you want to go check it out, Luke 18, verse 9, in which Jesus takes that mark of humility among Christians, or at least what he wants Christians to have, and he changes it a little bit, or at least he puts it in a different light. Because the parable beginning in verse 9 has two guys. Once again, you have a Pharisee, okay, and you have a tax collector. Now, tax collectors are not everybody's favorite person. Think of modern day IRS agent. Not a whole lot of people like them because, well, they take our money, right? Well, when you have a Pharisee, a guy who's supposed to be a religious elite, and a tax collector on the other side, chances are the original audience, they would think that the Pharisee is going to be the noble one in this, right? Or at least that's how it's supposed to be. But then what Jesus is telling in this parable are their prayers between the Pharisee and tax collector. Starting verse 10, he says, 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood up and prayed about himself, God, I thank you that I am not like other men, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and give a tenth of all I get. Okay, here's where this guy's going wrong. Because instead of addressing God in the way that you should, he's sitting there and trying to build his image up in his prayer to the Father. He's so focused on who he is, trying to justify himself before God. I hate to tell you, we can't justify ourselves before God. That's Christ's job. But then listen to what the tax collector says. Picking up in verse 13. But the tax collector stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven, but beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. It's not just humbling yourselves before other people around you, not just taking on that servant mentality that we're supposed to have as followers of Christ. It also includes humbling yourself before God, before the Father, before the Holy One. When it's kind of like when the high priest would go into the Holy of Holies before the presence of God. He had to do it a certain way in order for it to be acceptable to God. Well, to me, our prayer life needs to mimic that. To be humble before him, to acknowledge who we are, because he already knows. He already sees everything. He knows everything that we do. He knows that we're sinners. And yet that love and mercy overcomes that. But it's not our place to sit there, beat our chest like the Pharisee and be like, hey, look how holy I am. That's not the point. You can look at James 4:10. It says, humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. I mentioned earlier, humbling yourself, it's not thinking less about yourself. It's thinking about yourself less. And that's going to be, according to that first parable, humble yourselves in terms of other people and their needs and what their problems are. But humble yourself before God. If you could do that, then the other part of that's going to take care of itself. If you understand who God is and what's important to him, and you can humble yourselves to a point where your life shows that, well, then we can become those living sacrifices that Paul talks about in Romans. Because to me, the truest mark of humility as a Christian is thinking less of me and more of thee. You know, right now, we have a lot of time on our hands. You know, we have all of our passions, all of our interests, all of our hobbies, sports, whatever. You know, they're done right now, at least temporarily. God has single-handedly, God has given us a chance to where everything else that stands in the way is removed. And right now you have ample opportunity to seek him. We need to be thinking less of ourselves, more of others, and more of him. And I can't think of a better thing to do with our time right now than to seek God in our lives. Hope you're praying. I hope you're studying. I hope you're dwelling on whatever it is that you're getting out of the Word and trying to figure out, all right, what does this mean for my life? And if you need some help with that, you can always holler at me. But for now, I guess that's all I got. Love you guys. Miss you. Maybe we'll get to see each other soon.